Thousands of years ago, in the earliest chapters of human history, the world was very different from the one we know today. According to the biblical account in the book of Genesis, humanity had multiplied across the earth. Cities may not yet have risen in stone, but civilization had already begun to take shape. Families grew, knowledge increased, culture expanded. But alongside human progress, something else was growing: corruption. The text describes a world filled with violence, moral decay, and widespread wickedness. Human thoughts, we are told, had become continually inclined toward evil. Justice was rare. Compassion was fading. Power ruled over righteousness. This was not merely a period of moral weakness, it was a collapse of spiritual order. In this environment, the biblical narrative introduces one of the most significant figures in ancient history: Noah. Noah is described as a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and one who walked faithfully with God. While the world around him descended into chaos, Noah stood apart. Not as a warrior, not as a king, not as a prophet calling down fire from heaven, but as a man who obeyed. The story suggests that God observed the condition of humanity and was grieved by what he saw. Violence had filled the earth, trust between people had broken down, creation itself seemed corrupted by human choices. And so a decision was made. The flood narrative is not introduced as a random catastrophe, but as a divine judgment, a reset of a world that had lost its moral foundation. Yet even in judgment, there was mercy. God chose one man, Noah. The selection of Noah is central to understanding the story. The text does not describe him as perfect, it describes him as righteous in his generation. This distinction matters. In a society overwhelmed by corruption, Noah lived differently. He listened, he trusted, and when instructed to act, he obeyed, even when the command made no practical sense. Because what came next would require extraordinary faith. God instructed Noah to build an ark, a massive vessel designed not for travel, but for survival. The specifications were detailed, hundreds of cubits in length, constructed of gopher wood, sealed inside and out with pitch, and built with multiple decks. This was not a small boat. By ancient standards, it was an engineering project unlike anything described in early biblical literature. And yet there is no recorded argument, no hesitation, no negotiation. Noah built. For years, possibly decades, construction continued. The text does not describe public reaction in detail, but later traditions suggest ridicule and disbelief. Building a massive vessel far from any visible sea would have appeared irrational. Still, Noah continued, because the warning was clear. A flood was coming, a flood unlike anything humanity had ever seen. The instructions given to Noah were precise. The ark was to be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. In modern measurements, that would make it approximately 450 feet in length, longer than a football field. It would include 3 decks and a single door on its side. A window or opening was to be constructed near the roofline, allowing light and air to enter. The design was not elegant. It was not built for speed or navigation. It had no sails, no rudder, no visible means of steering. It was built to float. This detail is significant. The ark was not meant to escape the flood through human control. It was meant to endure it through divine preservation. Along with his wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives, Noah was instructed to bring animals into the ark. Pairs of every kind of living creature were to enter, male and female, to preserve life after the coming destruction. In some cases, the text specifies additional pairs of clean animals, possibly for sacrificial purposes later. The logistics would have been immense. Food had to be stored, space had to be organized. Living creatures of every size and temperament had to be housed within a confined structure for an unknown duration. Yet the narrative remains strikingly simple. Noah did everything just as God commanded him. When the ark was completed and all preparations were made, the moment arrived. Noah was 600 years old when the floodwaters came upon the earth. The biblical account describes 2 simultaneous events. The fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. This imagery suggests not only rainfall from above, but subterranean waters breaking through the surface of the earth. Then it began. Rain fell, not for an hour, not for a day, for 40 days and 40 nights. In the ancient world, the number 40 often symbolized a period of testing, trial, or transformation. But beyond symbolism, the physical reality described is overwhelming. Continuous rainfall, rising waters, collapsing landscapes. As the waters increased, the ark was lifted above the ground. What had once rested on dry land began to float. Villages disappeared, fields vanished, the highest hills were eventually covered. Everything outside the ark was swallowed by water. The text is direct and unembellished. All life on dry land perished. This was not a localized storm. It was described as a total undoing of the created order, a return in some ways to the watery chaos described at the beginning of Genesis. Inside the ark, however, life continued. 8 people, countless animals. Darkness, broken only by limited light from above. The sound of rain striking wood. The movement of water beneath them. There is no detailed description of conversation inside the ark. No dramatic speeches are recorded. The focus remains on survival and waiting. And the waiting would be long. Because although the rain lasted 40 days, the waters would remain on the earth far longer. The flood narrative emphasizes a crucial turning point with a simple phrase. But God remembered Noah. In biblical language, remembrance does not imply forgetfulness. It signals action, a shift from judgment toward restoration. A wind passed over the earth, and the waters began to recede. Although the rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights, the flood itself lasted much longer. The waters continued to prevail upon the earth for 150 days. The ark drifted, carried not by human direction, but by currents beyond human control. Inside, Noah and his family waited. There were no maps to consult, no horizon to study, no clear sense of progress. Time passed in uncertainty. Then, according to the account, the ark came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. The text does not describe a dramatic collision or a visible shoreline. It simply states that the vessel settled. Stability replaced motion. Still, the earth was not yet dry. Months passed as the waters gradually receded. The tops of the mountains became visible. What had once been entirely submerged slowly re-emerged into view. At this stage, Noah began to test the conditions outside. He released a raven. The bird flew back and forth, unable to find a resting place amid the remaining waters. Then Noah sent out a dove. The dove, unlike the raven, returned to him, for it found no place to set its feet. 7 days later, he sent the dove again. This time it returned in the evening with a freshly plucked olive leaf in its beak. The symbolism is powerful but understated. Vegetation had begun to grow again. Life was reappearing. The earth was healing. After another 7 days, Noah sent the dove once more. It did not return. The message was clear. The land was becoming habitable again. Eventually, after more than a year from the day they entered the ark, the earth was dry. The ground, once overwhelmed by water, could sustain life again. But Noah did not leave immediately. He waited until God instructed him to come out. This detail reflects a consistent theme throughout the narrative. Noah did not act independently of divine direction. He entered the ark when commanded. He remained inside when required, and he exited only when told it was time. When Noah, his family, and the animals finally stepped onto dry ground, the world they knew was gone. Landscapes had changed, populations had vanished. Civilization, as it existed before the flood, had ended. Human history was beginning again. Noah's first recorded action after leaving the ark was not construction, exploration, or settlement. It was worship. He built an altar and offered sacrifices from the clean animals that had been preserved. This act signified gratitude, reverence, and acknowledgement of survival, not as personal achievement, but as divine mercy. In response, the narrative describes a covenant, a binding promise. God declared that never again would a flood destroy all life on earth. While human nature remained flawed, the cycle of seasons would continue. Seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night. As a sign of this covenant, a symbol was given: the rainbow. Set in the clouds, it served as a visible reminder of restraint, mercy, and promise. Whenever storms would gather in future generations, the appearance of the rainbow would point back to this moment, a declaration that destruction would not have the final word. The story of Noah concludes not with spectacle, but with continuity. Humanity moves forward through his descendants. The earth begins again. Yet the central theme remains clear. In a time of widespread corruption, one man chose obedience. In a moment of global judgment, mercy preserved a remnant. And through 40 days that changed humanity, the narrative affirms both justice and grace, destruction and renewal, judgment and covenant. The flood story is not presented merely as an ancient disaster account, but as a theological turning point in early biblical history. It marks both an end and a beginning, a world undone and a world restored. The story of Noah is more than an account of survival. It is a narrative rich with meaning, symbolism, and lessons that resonate far beyond its ancient context. First, the flood reminds us of the consequences of human actions. The world before Noah was filled with violence, corruption, and moral decay. The narrative is stark. Unchecked wickedness can bring destruction. This serves as a warning across generations, urging reflection on personal and collective responsibility. Yet intertwined with judgment is mercy. Noah's story illustrates that even in times of great turmoil, obedience, faith, and righteousness are preserved and honored. One man's decision to walk faithfully with God ensured the continuation of life itself. His story encourages us to consider: how can our choices today impact the world around us? The ark itself is symbolic. Beyond a vessel of survival, it represents preparation, foresight, and trust. Noah's meticulous construction demonstrates that faith is not passive. It requires action, discipline, and commitment. The ark carries not just bodies, but hope, renewal, and the continuity of creation. The flood's duration, 40 days and 40 nights, is also meaningful. In biblical literature, the number 40 often signifies periods of testing, trial, or transformation. In Noah's experience, it was a time of endurance, patience, and dependence on God. In life, trials may feel overwhelming, yet perseverance and trust can guide one toward restoration. The release of the raven and the dove illustrates another vital lesson: discernment and observation. Even after judgment, there is a process of understanding when it is time to move forward. The olive leaf brought by the dove became a tangible symbol of renewal, growth, and hope, a small sign that life endures even after devastation. Finally, the covenant and the rainbow remind us of the balance between justice and mercy. Humanity is imperfect, yet God's promise establishes order, continuity, and reassurance. The rainbow is more than a visual phenomenon. It is a timeless emblem of restraint, compassion, and divine commitment to life. Noah's story is not only historical or theological, it is universal. Across cultures, tales of floods echo similar themes: judgment, survival, and renewal. These parallels underscore the narrative's enduring relevance and its resonance with fundamental human concerns: morality, resilience, and hope. In conclusion, the story of Noah is a meditation on obedience, faith, and the enduring relationship between humanity and the divine. It challenges us to reflect on our actions, our responsibilities, and our responses to the trials we face. It reminds us that even in the most overwhelming circumstances, there is a path forward, one guided by integrity, faith, and a vision of renewal. 40 days changed humanity, yes, but the lessons of Noah echo through all generations. They invite us to consider, in the floods of our own lives, how do we act with faith, hope, and courage? How do we ensure that, like Noah, our choices preserve life, foster renewal, and honor the sacred trust of creation? The ark has long vanished from the earth, but its story endures as a testament to resilience, obedience, and the power of hope. If this story of Noah inspired you or gave you a new perspective on faith, hope, and perseverance, there is much more waiting for you. Subscribe to my channel, Beyond Time, and join us as we explore more stories from the Bible, hidden truths, and lessons that have shaped humanity. Don't miss the journey. Click subscribe and continue discovering the remarkable stories that have endured through history.